In the year 1997, the future is in chaos and turmoil. Mankind is on the brink of extinction. Brave survivors band together and build a time displacement apparatus to receive a signal from a parallel future. This transmission is the Vundacast.
There's one team that kicks ass. They're assembled. They're the Vundacast. Never back down from the brass. Always start first. Never finish last. Had a max speed. Bit too fast. Oh no, they're out of gas. It's okay there. Just a podcast. They're the greatest. We're the Vundacast.
Welcome to the Vundacast, the podcast that knows that whatever day of the week it is, we will remember the late great John Huber, Brody Lee, Luke Harper. Happy New Year's on behalf of the Vundacast. I am your host, Steven, and with me today is the podcast champion of the world, D-Rock.
World non-binary champion in the house. I'm gonna say that every time now. I'm sticking with it. In the house. That's my new catchphrase.
Your new
It's new
catchphrase.
and hip for the kids.
You should close every tweet that you give out now with "in the house." Just close every
In the house.
ITH. Because and a lot of people could get on that bandwagon because most people are in their
Right.
houses. At least the cool people.
That's true. Yeah, that's like the theme of the last year is in the house.
So we made it through 2020.
We did.
D-Rock was counting us down day by day.
Oh yeah.
And
I was counting down to New Year's Eve to the 2020 is over party. I was very excited to party this year into oblivion, and party we did, but not really.
my December leading up to the end of the year was extremely festive. Danny baked a lot of delicious Christmassy baked treats. We watched several seasons of Gingerbread Baking Showdown and Holiday
Whoa.
Baking Championship, and just a lot of intense Christmas themed baking shows that
Nice.
are available on Hulu via the Food Network. I also saw more Christmas movies this year than I have in many years past. Like, not since I was a little kid have I watched so many Christmas movies.
Wow. That's really interesting because I watched fewer Christmas movies this year than I have in like a really long time. It's been kind of tapering off each year. Each year I find myself less and less enthused about the Christmas season for whatever reason, and just end up not really watching very many Christmas movies.
I just felt like I had no other outlet for Christmas than
Right.
watching people make fake snow on TV.
Yeah.
So that felt like, I could hold that in my heart. And the other thing too is that you can't watch Christmas stuff if it's
Any other time of year.
November, December. You just
Right.
automatically become a crazy person.
Right? Yeah, like it's like you feel weird. You're like, why am I doing this? I feel like I'm trying to comfort myself somehow for something, and like I feel like this is like a cry for help.
Like, that would probably be the ultimate form of like self-confidence, is if you could enjoy Christmas things without shame of insanity.
Yeah, any time of the
Not
year.
Christmas time. But you'd still be crazy to your peers, however confident you are.
That's I mean that's how it is being confident and being, authentic, is like everyone's gonna think you're a weirdo, but the trick is not to care.
I saw all 3 of the Santa Claus trilogy starring Tim Allen.
Oh, they're so good. All 3 of them are so good.
The first one is so good,
Yeah.
and then the next 2 just become more and more watered down.
Yeah, I mean the premise becomes so much more convoluted, but like I love those other 2 movies. Like they're better than I expected them to be when I first saw them.
The third movie got me really excited because I'd never seen the third movie before.
Yeah.
And part of the third movie's thing is time travel. Like I'm gonna go back in time and replace Tim Allen when he takes up the suit. And so for a second I was like, oh, this could get really interesting here with time travel. But they don't go that way at all. It's just like really quick, and then just like look at what this world is like when you're not Santa. It's just more capitalistic.
Right. Yeah.
And it's strange when watching Christmas movies to see how they deal with capitalism.
Oh yeah, for
in
sure.
the Christmas movie, because whether they want to or not, there's some sort of like, there's some sort of messaging that you're doing to children about what the values of this holiday are.
It's impossible not to get into the topic of consumerism when you make a Christmas movie. Almost impossible, because so much of what we think of as being Christmas is, buying presents and giving presents, and that's like kind of, what like what society has kind of, all the commercials and everything have kind of conditioned us all into like, that's kind of how it is. That's Christmas is kind of the corporate consumerist holiday at this point. So it is really interesting to see how particular movies engage with that.
I also rewatched Home Alone and Home Alone 2, and I haven't seen Home Alone in a long time. And it's amazing that Home Alone 2 has like the greatest business toy store owner in the world,
right?
Who works there and is giving so much money to orphaned kids and is like so nice and gentile and just so sweet.
Right.
And in that same movie, you have Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. I recently watched there's that Netflix series, The Movies That Made Us, and one of them is about Home Alone. I don't know if you've watched that one.
I haven't seen the Home Alone episode. I saw the Elf episode.
Right. No, yeah, the holiday one that just came out. Yeah. The Home Alone one it's really good, obviously. But the one thing that I always come back to from that, especially when I'm watching the movie itself, is there's a section of the Movies That Made Us episode where they talk about how the people who did all the stunts for like the house when they're like trying to break into the house and all the fucking like falling on shit and shit like that, they did all that shit like for real. Like there were no like crash pads, there was nothing. They were just like falling on concrete like over and over. And it became like, for the people actually making the movie, they were talking about like it became like almost like a horror movie because it was so excruciating watching these people just like fall on their asses really hard over and over. So now whenever I watch that movie, I can't help thinking about like, oh my God, that what just happened, it actually happened. That actually hurt as much as it looks like it did.
There was someone on Twitter who went viral for their Home Alone 3 pitch, which was they think that Kevin McAllister grows up to be gay.
Whoa.
And
nice.
that he should be in the movie with the guy from Schitt's Creek. What's his name? Levy.
Oh yeah, Dan Levy.
Dan Levy, and that they're a gay couple, and it's Home Alone 3, and they're house sitting somewhere for Christmas, and they get tracked down by the wet bandits who want to get their revenge once and for all. and then Home Alone happens.
Yeah. I think that would be interesting just because like I feel like any attempt at a Home Alone movie where Kevin is an adult is like not a comedy anymore. It's like a home invasion thriller. You know what I mean? Like if you take out the fact that he's a kid and the fact that all of this is really silly, those movies are kind of like horrifying.
It would just be interesting just to see what his therapy session is like.
Yeah. Oh my God. So much PTSD.
Like, this holiday is coming again. Is everyone gonna leave me? Am I gonna get killed?
Get attacked by fucking robbers. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Poor Kevin. The other thing is that you'd think that movie, like that script, you'd think like one of the points of that script, like for a kid, would be like, it's Christmas, no one's around, I don't get any presents. You know what I mean? But right. Kevin never really cares. You know what I mean? He never has that like superficial moment that he's missing out on like Christmas presents because he doesn't have a family. He just cares about his family. Like the movie like jumps past the consumerism.
The family being gone is his Christmas present. Like his ability to like do whatever the fuck he wants for the next like however many weeks is like a present unto itself. He's like eating ice cream and watching violent movies and ordering pizza whenever he wants and shit.
It's just a great movie. And when I was a kid and it came out and people were like, this is a classic, I was like, whatever. But now as an adult, I can respect that it's a classic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't really appreciate what makes it so great when you're part of the target audience, you know what I mean? Like you just like laugh at all the, dumb guys falling down and it's hilarious. And for a long time, I actually liked the second movie better just because I think it's funnier. I think the gags with Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern are actually funnier in the second one, especially when they call back to like the first movie. I think is really effective. But like as a movie, Home Alone, the first one is obviously a much better overall film.
It's just weird to see how like as a sequel they were like, we're going beat for beat as much as we can, trying to be the same as the first movie.
Yeah.
And there's something that's really comforting about that in sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also something just very lazy about it too.
Right. Yeah. They kind of just put a lot of I think the fact that I don't think it would work. I think it would work less and feel a lot lazier if it wasn't for the fact that, both Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern are like going into the house kind of expecting the things that happened last time, and then Kevin kind of plays on those expectations and like fakes them out and does a different thing. But it is like, it is very much like Home Alone in a different house, like that's basically the whole movie.
Only this time it's more dangerous.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Only, like this time somehow Kevin is able to find a house that just happens to be owned by his uncle, where there's all kinds of things that he can use to hurt people, way more than there were in his actual house.
So yeah, I saw a lot of very basic Christmas movies. I saw Die Hard 1 and 2.
Oh yeah, totally.
And Die Hard 2's a lot better or a lot more entertaining than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of people most people talk about like 1 and 3 as like the favorites, and which I agree with, but I haven't seen the second one that many times, so it's been a while since I've seen it. I think it might be worth a rewatch at some point. I love that the plane that like leaks the fuel and then he lights it and it like blows it up. That's a cool scene.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good action set pieces. It's just the plot gets kind of confusing at times because it's trying to like obfuscate its mystery from you.
Right.
So as you're watching it, like it's just a lot to process. It's not as simple or as clean as the first Die Hard.
I think I liked the reporter as like the side villain is like so much more effective in the second movie. I mean, he does more in the second movie where he like gives them away and shit. Like that's effective.
And it's such a weird thing too to do in a sequel where like of all the characters in the first Die Hard that I would think would be in the sequel, like that reporter wouldn't be the top of my list of characters to translate.
Yeah. It's kind of like the psychiatrist in Terminator that like he was just like nobody in the first movie and then he just like showed up in every single Terminator movie after that. It was like so hilarious.
Watching that guy grow old.
Yeah, I love him in the third one where he's got like PTSD and he's like super freaked out by everything. It's hilarious.
So what did you watch to get through the holidays?
For the holidays, I didn't watch as many Christmas movies as I planned on doing, frankly. Like I don't know, for some reason I kept wanting to watch non-Christmas movies. It wasn't that I didn't want to watch Christmas movies. I just wanted to watch other things more for whatever reason. I did watch a few of the like staples, like I always watch. Well, the biggest staple for me at the holidays is Mickey's Christmas Carol. Is my all-time favorite. I've been watching it since I was like 3 years old. It's such a good, really good, like succinct, short rendition of A Christmas Carol. It's really funny and imaginative. So there's that and Frosty and the Grinch and all those. Another one that I always try to watch at the holidays is Fred Claus, which I think at this point many of our listeners have heard me rant about Fred Claus at one point or another. Danielle and I went to see that movie in the theater when it came out because we could never agree on a fucking movie because we like we had two like totally different tastes in like what kind of movies we want to see in the theater. I wanted to go see like No Country for Old Men and like There Will Be Blood, and she was like, no, I want to see comedies because I like to laugh with people. So we ended up seeing some weird movies because of that. We saw Semi-Pro in the theater just totally randomly and like surprised by how like good it was. And we also saw this movie, Fred Claus, which the first time you see this movie, it's like, obviously it's like the stupidest thing you've ever seen in your life. But it has a little bit of charm. It's, Ludacris plays an elf and there's like all this like stupidness. And the cast is like so good that you're like, why are all the like Kevin Spacey and fucking what's his name? The guy that plays Santa. Paul Giamatti and all these people are in it. And it's such a dumb movie, but it's also like I've watched it so many times now because, well, it started with the experience of seeing it in the theater. When we first saw it, like it was so dumb and ridiculous that we were like making fun of it the whole time. And as we were making fun of it, our comments got louder and louder as we realized that no one really cares if we talk during this movie. So people started laughing at our comments more than the actual movie. And I've always that's like a very memorable experience. So I started like rewatching it because it reminded me of that, and started to realize that it's actually like way deeper than it seems the first time you see it. There's like all this really good stuff about, how kids that like no kids are really bad, they just get caught up in bad situations. There's stuff about like family drama and being the black sheep of the family, and having a sibling that outshines you all the time, and your parents are always like, why can't you be more like blah blah blah. And it's I would definitely recommend like going back and watching it and like really looking for the like deeper themes that are in. I don't want to talk about it like it's fucking The Godfather or whatever, but like it's deeper than it seems, for sure.
Vince Vaughn has quite a few Christmas movies on his resume. I think he's a big
Does he?
Christmas fan.
Yeah, that makes sense. What other Christmas movies he been in?
He is in a movie. He has a movie called Four Christmases.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Where him and Reese Witherspoon, their like travel plans get canceled, and they usually go on vacation for Christmas, but this year they have to visit all four of their parents because all their parents are divorced.
Yeah.
So they have to go and do 4 different Christmases. Then he has, of course, Fred Claus. I could have sworn there was a third one. I'm looking for his filmography right now.
Yeah.
But I could have sworn there's a third one. 2's enough. You're a Christmas freak. How could you do 2 Christmases? What's wrong with you?
I just love that Vince Vaughn has made like an entire acting career out of playing literally one character in every single movie he's ever been in.
That's all you got to do. You got to have a type, and you just be that type.
Right. Like even Will Ferrell, like kind of the same in every movie, but he switches it up a little bit, at least in terms of like the person's job or like, whatever, something that they, he does different things. He'll do a Southern accent or something, but Vince Vaughn is like just Vince Vaughn in every movie. That's just his only.
He did Fred Claus and 4 Christmases back to back.
Oh, see, yeah, he is totally.
Was he just in a Christmas mood for that one part of his career?
Maybe he was in like a happy relationship at the time, and he just loved Christmas because he got to like be with his
was some studio like
and their family.
Some studios like, we're gonna make Vince Vaughn bigger than Santa Claus.
Right.
You don't even
and
know.
He's still Vince Vaughn in, I don't know about 4 Christmases, but in Fred Claus, he's still just literally Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn Claus. There we go.
Vince, yeah.
So what else we got into the new year?
Well, so I watched some Christmas staples, but mostly I was just like watching I was on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I for some reason decided that, I wanted to kind of exercise some of my demons of Christmas Eve of 2014 was the day when I first told my ex that I had a crush on her. And we ended up getting together. And so that day always kind of reminds me of her. So I decided to, I guess, kind of steer into the skid a little bit. And I decided to like start a new tradition of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day watching like super sappy, emotional movies. And so I watched The Fault in Our Stars. I watched The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is very like that that reminds me so much of like high school. Also, that movie. I watched this movie, The Edge of 17, which is interesting because
You just angst it out. You were just like all the angst in the world, please.
oh yeah, all the angst. It was just yeah. It was just, like I said, searing to the skin, man. The Edge of 17 actually, I did sort of an unofficial count of the movies that I rewatched the most times this year. And The Edge of 17 was actually the movie that I rewatched the most, which is it's interesting because I didn't see it for the first time until this year. And so I just ended up like watching it a bunch of times over and over. I ended up watching it, I think, like 7 times this year.
Whoa.
And my biggest thing about that movie is I feel like in the end, I don't understand why Nadine is the one that's like in the wrong in all of this. Like she has been tortured by her brother and her best friend for like the whole movie with them like going at, and maybe I'm biased because I was like sort of caught in a little bit of a love triangle of my own in high school, so I really like related to that being in that position. But I really felt like her brother and her best friend were kind of being dicks about like having this relationship and like making her go with them to a party and like what the fuck, no, that's horrible, that's a horrible thing to do. And they never really like were contrite or apologetic about it at all, which like I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. So like I kind of feel like Nadine is the only person in the movie that has rights and everybody else is just kind of an asshole, especially her brother. And so I watched that on Christmas, and then I also watched this movie, Happy Anniversary, that I actually discovered 2 years ago, right around the time, like right after I broke up with my ex, which immediately appealed to me when I read the description, and it said it was about a couple who have just reached their 3-year anniversary and they are deciding whether or not they're going to break up. And I was like, oh shit, because that's like exactly like my breakup with my ex started like less than a week after our 3rd anniversary. So that really hit close to home. And plus Noelle Wells is in it and she's amazing and I have a huge crush on her. And she actually wrote and directed a movie that I saw earlier this year also called Mr. Roosevelt that is really, really good, a really like unappreciated, like unnoticed movie that is really, really good, and I would definitely recommend it. So that was my Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. And before that,
Noelle Wells. I know her because
she was in Master of None.
Well, despite all that, I know her from Star Trek.
Oh yeah.
This year, she just in the animated show they dropped Star Trek Lower Decks. She
nice.
an ensign named Tendi, and she's really funny. I like her a lot.
Yeah, she has amazing comedic timing. She's obviously done a lot of like improv because she, especially in Mr. Roosevelt, she does a lot of that. The other person that's in Happy Anniversary I wish more people had seen this movie because I forgot what his name is. Rahul. Yeah, from Bly Manor. He is fucking hilarious in this movie. He's so good. And I was really excited when I saw that he was going to be in Bly Manor because I saw him in Happy Anniversary and he was so good. So I definitely recommend that. And
Ben Schwartz is in it.
Cool. Ben Schwartz. Yeah, he's the male lead. He's great. He's really good. I didn't know that he had the kind of like dramatic chops that he has in that movie, but he's really good. He's really like wistful and, you know.
That sounds tough. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, it's really good. And then before that, I was on a big time Richard Linklater kick. I decided I've been meaning for a while to like. I always see people like, you know, on Twitter and stuff like, who's your favorite director or who are your 4 favorite directors or whatever. And I never really have an answer for that because like a lot of my favorite movies, like either the director didn't really do much else or I just haven't seen their other movies. So I started wanting to like, you know, go into like directors who have made movies that I like and like see like how much of their catalog I really like. And so I started doing that with Richard Linklater. I started with Waking Life, which is a lot better than I remember it being. And I think once you realize that the politics and the like actual substance of what everyone's saying doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of what the movie's trying to accomplish, it's a much better experience. And you start to see what themes are emerging, the themes of like alienation. You know, this kid keeps on talking to people and trying to connect, and they just start like lecturing about philosophy in his face, and he ends up more alienated than he was before. So that was really cool. I watched Slacker. Have you ever seen Slacker?
I saw Slacker back in the day.
Slacker? I like Slacker.
That's the movie that inspired Kevin Smith to be able to direct Clerks.
Oh, really? That makes sense. Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
That movie gave him the confidence that he could do it too.
Yeah, and like it's Kevin Smith definitely takes after Richard Linklater in terms of making the city that the movies are set in a big part of the movies, because Richard Linklater's movies are all very like the fact that they're in Texas is always like part of, you know, it's not always a huge plot point, but it's always a mainstay. That's what Slacker is. You know, Slacker is just like going, it's basically like, it's kind of like Waking Life, but like real, you know, not animated, because he just goes around like Austin, Texas, looking at all these different people like pontificating, and each one connects to the next one. And
Slacker, the thing with Slacker is that like on paper, like I can see how Slacker is like a good template for a movie, you know what I mean? For your first movie.
Yeah.
But once you watch it, like you realize like this is not really like an effective movie, you know what I mean? Like it's a good template for a first film, but the way that the film executes it, like it's not like, it doesn't have like that thematic drive that like real movies have in that way, you know what I mean?
It's very like theater of the absurd, I think. It's very like, it's not, you know, following a plot line. It's just kind of meandering and just like following people around and connecting one to the next. But there's no like, you know, common thread in all of it. It's just kind of, I think that's on purpose.
Well, what I think is interesting is to see the growth from Slacker to Dazed and Confused.
Oh, yeah.
You can see how he's using sort of the same techniques, but this time he has sort of a plot that you can hang all these scenes on that makes it feel like a full movie, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's, I mean, and even from Slacker to like Waking Life, there's much more of a common thread, a line going through all of these interactions than there is in Slacker, which is Slacker feels very like a guy walked around Austin with a camera and just went from person to person and filmed them, pontificating about whatever fucking conspiracy theory shit or whatever. And then Waking Life, like I was saying before, has much more of a, like, this kid, which was interesting. I didn't realize until I just saw it a couple weeks ago that the kid in Waking Life is the kid from Dazed and Confused. Which is really interesting. So I kind of like to imagine that he just like grew up and like decided he wanted to go around like talking philosophy with a bunch of people. But there is much more of like a linear narrative running through all of this very tangential stuff that's going on. But also like, you look at a movie like Before Sunrise is another one that I rewatched for the first time in a few years. And
I've never seen
also,
the Sunrise Sunset trilogy.
Oh, I've seen Sunrise and Sunset. I haven't seen Midnight so far. But like Before Sunrise it's similar in the sense that there's a lot of scenes of just the two of them having these like deep conversations, but it's also like there's much more of a linear narrative going on where there's it's a very tight, like effective premise of these two people get off of the train and like they have like 24 hours to spend together before she has to get back on the train. And it's a really beautiful, effective, I mean, it has to be one of the best romantic comedies that's ever been made because it's just such a high quality movie, but it's got that romantic comedy, spirit and essence, and like the very whimsical conversations that they have and stuff like that. And then Before Sunset is really interesting because the entire movie it's shot in real time, so it's just 80 minutes of them reconnecting for the first time in 9 years, and it's just the whole thing. It's their whole entire interaction that they have in those 80 minutes, and it's really beautifully shot, and the way that it's the way that it progresses and the tension kind of builds, and they're clashing with each other in some of the same ways that they did in the first movie that gave them the chemistry that they have because they're able to like challenge each other in those ways. It's a really, really beautiful, effective movie. And the most recent one that I just watched A Scanner Darkly, which was so much better than I ever thought it was going to be. I had no idea how good this movie was going to be, and it really took me by surprise. I remember when it first came out, the thing that kind of, the first thing the first impression I got of the movie was, oh, this like gimmicky animated movie. Yeah, I'm not really interested in that. And so the first thing I was looking for in watching the movie was like, okay, maybe there's a reason why he used this like animation thing, what could have been a total gimmick. And it's not. It's like there's a purpose to it. Like those identity hiding suits that they wear, they could have never been able to portray that the way that they did without using this like animation style that they did. And it's so effective, especially in like the final scene where Bob gets fired from the police or whatever the fuck they are. And you like the whole time that his boss is talking, it's like the camera is just focused in on this like constantly shifting face, and it like builds the tension so beautifully.
It's a dope movie. I remember watching it in high school and just being like, tripping out over how, how, what was the word, like edgecore it was, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it showed like people doing drugs as adults
right.
in a semi-functional like community. You know, it was
It's
interesting.
funny. It's like it's almost a stoner movie. It's almost like a stoner comedy, except that
There's
nothing is
paranoia,
funny because it's actually happening. It's not just delusions. It's not just stoner delusions. Everything is like actually happening. So it's actually scary
and then there's
instead.
also like there's this narc who's trying to get you the whole time.
Right,
You know,
right,
you know that shoe's gonna drop.
right. Yeah. And like we were talking about this the other day, the performances are so good, and the fact that that the actors are able to act in such a way that their performances come through all of that animation, like their facial expressions and stuff. You could tell that they kind of had to almost overact a little bit just so that their like facial expressions and mannerisms and stuff would come through the animation. I'm sure Linklater was like telling them, you need to exaggerate a little bit because there's this animation and it's, the subtleties and the animation actually captures a lot more of the subtleties of their face than you would think it would be capable of.
And
And yeah,
the cast is just so stellar. You have Winona
it's
Ryder,
such a great cast. Yeah.
you have Robert Downey Jr., you have Keanu Reeves, you have Woody
Winona
Harrelson.
Ryder, Woody Harrelson. Yeah, it is. It's really good.
All right, we got around 10 minutes or so left on my clock.
Well, so let me go and the other I watched two more Linklater movies. I watched School of Rock, which is really weird to me that Richard Linklater made that movie. I love that. I mean, I guess, either he just wanted to try something, he hadn't tried before, which sounds like him, or the studio was like, here, make this movie and we'll pay for like Boyhood or whatever the fuck he wanted to do or something like that. But it's a really good, for that style of movie, it's really good. I've always liked School of Rock. It's a fun movie.
It's a classic. It holds up.
And it's got an ethos, it's a very like, even a very mainstream, like Hollywood type of comedy. Linklater kind of injects some of his ethos, his punk rock and, some of that stuff into it. So that's really
I think that like with that movie and with Bad News Bears, which he remade, I think that he just wanted to make edgy kids movies,
Oh yeah.
To make kids movies that, are good.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, actually. And so the last, well, not the last, but the last chronologically, I guess, Richard Linklater movie I watched was Boyhood, which I've been meaning to watch for years now. And I had really high expectations for this movie, and it still somehow exceeded them because, which is really like, if you're going to make a like damn near 3-hour movie, it better be really engaging for the entire thing. And I love it because, it's that long for a reason, because it's portraying these sort of benign but like very important moments in these characters' lives, and it's excuse me, it's kind of, I feel like it's the closest I've ever seen a movie come to really capturing like a real human life on film, like a real, like what daily life is actually like, but also making it interesting enough that you're going to watch 3 hours of it. Because it's it's all these little moments throughout the kind of adolescence, the childhood and adolescence of like the main character, which is like the boy. And it's so beautiful, just like it's so it's so real, it's so true to life, it feels so much like real life. I've never seen a movie that felt like this much like real life before, and it made a really big impact on me. It was probably, I would say, it was tied with Midsummer for the best movie I saw last year.
Well,
Yeah.
I've never seen Boyhood. I
Yeah,
have to watch it.
you gotta see it. It's so worth the 3 hour time investment. Like I can't even I don't want to overhype it too much because but that's what I do. So
Mhm.
but yeah, I would if anybody needs to have Boyhood recommended to them at this point, like I would definitely highly recommend it.
I was gonna make some sort of boy joke, but I got nothing. Boy joke. What did I watch? Let's see. So I had one last Christmas movie that I didn't get a chance to see before Christmas, so I watched it after Christmas, which is The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Nice.
Written by Shane Black, who loves Christmas so much
Nice.
that he made this movie, and he said Iron Man 3 at Christmas, and he's just got a soft spot for Christmas.
And Lethal Weapon too, right?
And Lethal Weapon. It's a really fun movie. It still holds up. It was interesting reading the trivia about the movie, because this movie apparently followed Cutthroat Island, and Gina Davis was dating the director Rennie Harlan, who directed both this movie and Cutthroat Island.
Oh,
And
wow.
because Cutthroat Island was a flop and had a huge budget that it didn't make back,
Yeah.
A Long Kiss Goodnight sort of suffered for the sins of Cutthroat Island.
Right.
And so it wasn't received very well. But Rennie Harlan and Gina Davis were trying to establish female action heroes, and we're
nice.
trying to push that forward. And it's cool to see that they really pulled it off in The Long Kiss Goodnight. They have a badass super spy who, like, once she figures out that she's a spy, she's like just totally unbeatable, and she gets to be a badass mom who like fights for her kids. It's dope. It's a dope movie.
Nice.
And Samuel L. Jackson has some of the best lines of his career in this movie. He's listed it as one of his favorite roles that he's ever had.
I feel like I remember like seeing the commercial for it, and there was some like famous line from it that I can't remember what it is.
The greatest line he has at the end of the movie, after like getting blown out of a building and getting fucked up in a bunch of fights, he shows up in a car to save the day, and he goes, "That's right, you can't kill me, motherfuckers."
Nice.
Which is, Samuel Jackson. That's perfect.
So very Samuel Jackson, yeah.
So that's where it is.
That's beautiful.
Then, because of the Cutthroat Island situation, we then watch Cutthroat Island to see what all bad it is about. And this movie is clearly, the people who wrote Pirates of the Caribbean saw this movie, because there are so many dynamics in this movie that are just done so much better in Pirates of the Caribbean and are like really entertaining, that this movie just has like a lot of spectacle and action, but all the dialogue is just really horrible.
Yeah.
and like the plot is just kind of like fetch quests and meandering,
Right.
but it's got a female protagonist captain who is fighting for her captaincy,
Nice.
who does a lot of badass action, and like she gets into fist fights with dudes and like doesn't back down and just goes blow for blow. So I think that maybe some of the negative criticism was just people not wanting to maybe fully invest in a female action heroine
Yeah.
who's on the same level as her peers. Although
Right.
the dialogue does suck. If the dialogue was even halfway better, the movie might work.
Yeah.
That's available on Amazon Prime if anyone wants to watch the 1996 flop Cutthroat Island. They threw a lot of money at this movie. Like that's the one thing. Like
Really?
you watch it is like it's the 90s, so they don't have CGI to like hide everything. And you could tell that like they like really got these boats. They really blew up these boats. They really were on the water all night, you know,
Yeah.
and in the rain, and it looks amazing at moments.
Right. Yeah. That was that reminds me of like for some reason that reminded me of Demolition Man because I've always found it so weird in Demolition Man. At the beginning of the opening scene of the film, there's a huge like big budget, like clearly very expensive explosion at the very beginning of the movie, and then at the very end of the movie, there's another big explosion, but it seems like they like ran out of money and like weren't able to do the same kind of like big budget. So that it's like the lamest explosion I've ever seen to end a movie. It's just like a side shot of the building and like fire shoots out that's clearly like CG.
I just always you just gotta assume that the future tech, they have more better fire suppressant technologies in the future.
Maybe. That's a good explanation.
So you can't have cool explosions. Like they're shooting out, you know, freaking pasta sauce and taking out the fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I really appreciate like movies where I can clearly see how much care was put into like certain elements of it. I talked about that with Sinister a couple months ago when we were doing our Halloween thing, how like every level of that production was so impressive to me. And I rewatched Castaway for the first time since I saw it in the theater and was like really impressed by how good everything looked in that movie. Like the scenes of them like in the middle of the ocean after the plane is crashed and like the plane is sinking and the waves are going and like it's filmed so beautifully and like it's lit well enough that it looks amazing but poorly enough that you can't tell like the computer graphics where they are and stuff like that. That movie really impressed me with how well it was made. And what was it? Robert Zemeckis, I think, that made that.
That's back when he had a delicate touch and not a hard touch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's another director that like there's a few movies of his that I really, really are like pretty high on my favorite. Like Forrest Gump is one of my favorite movies. Contact, I think, is a really underrated movie. I mean, Back to the Future obviously is high on the list. Yeah.
His modern work is just not that good. That's the problem.
I don't know how much I've seen of his modern stuff.
He just did the Witches remake that
I heard that was
on HBO Max, and someone had a review of it where they were basically like talking about his whole career.
Right.
And it was something to the effect of like, you know, imagine the person who like so subtly did special effects deciding later in his career that the only thing he's interested is the special effects
Yeah.
and he doesn't care about characters anymore. And like
Yeah.
every movie, he just keeps on showing that he'd rather lean into those parts of filmmaking than like the storytelling parts of filmmaking.
That's too bad because he talks about in in the commentary of Forrest Gump, he talks about like the important, like every movie has to have like spectacle and story or something. But like there was definitely an emphasis on like story and like it's sad in terms of like you're talking about like how he leans so heavily on CGI now. Like think about like thinking back to like the opening scene of Forrest Gump, the feather was CG. Like a lot of people don't know that the whole feather sequence was CG, but you'd never be able to tell that. Like, other than the fact that like there's no way they could have gotten this shot, but you can't like visually tell that that's CG, like, and it's so beautifully done. And for him to like double down so much on CG after that is disappointing.
Yeah, he did the Polar Express and he did that Christmas Carol with
Right.
Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And then I believe recently he remade there was a documentary about crossing the World Trade Center on a wire, and he did like
Man on Wire
adaptation of it. And
have you ever seen the original Man on Wire?
Yeah, I saw the original. It's really good.
It's a fucking excellent film. I just had to get that in there.
Yeah, but the remake is just, taking all of the...
Right.
It's just how much CG can we throw on this to make it look like the 70s?
That's like the worst thing to do with that movie. Like the thing that's so great about Man on Wire is how like sparse it is. Well, that's not the thing that's great about it, but like it is very sparse. It's like, like how are you going to like throw CG at this? Like the whole point of this movie is it's one man and a wire and he's like all alone up there and just, why would you like throw a bunch of bells and whistles at that? It just takes away from the impact of it.
Because I'm Robert Zemeckis. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
High five.
Just do the whole Man on Wire, just CG like Polar Express.
Any last thing you want to cover before I close it up?
I don't think so. Not without like getting into like a whole nother tangent about books and music. So I'll just save that for a different time.
We'll save that, and then we'll also tease that to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the classic,
that all-time classic,
that all-time classic on everyone's list. Pauly Shore's probably second greatest movie, if not third.
Opus.
Biodome.
Wait, what would be his first or second?
Oh, I think clearly there's people that are gonna say Encino Man is his best.
Okay.
And then I'm sure that there are tons of like rednecks who are gonna say Son-in-Law is his movie.
Nice.
Because it has, a thematic resonance for them.
Yeah.
But
was he in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead?
I don't know. I know he's in a Goofy movie.
He's in
the Army. Is it in the Army?
In the Army now. I was gonna say, yeah.
He did a lot of movies for Middle America.
He did, yeah.
But Biodome, he did it to educate Middle America about ecosystems and the environment.
So have you seen it?
I haven't watched it recently, but I loved it as a kid.
You've seen it. I have never seen this movie, so what? I'm going in cold turkey. It should be really interesting.
I loved Biodome as a kid, and Biodome has like the DNA of every stoner movie. It has friends who are idiots,
right?
Who are gonna get through this situation.
Yeah, totally.
So we'll see
So
how.
yeah, that should be an interesting experience. It's on Hulu, right?
It's if that's what I said earlier, then possibly that's correct.
Yeah.
Let me double check.
I think you said that before we started.
So everyone should check out Biodome so that they can join us in this beautiful conversation. Yes, available on Hulu. Biodome.
All right. A movie adventure. It's gonna be good.
You can tweet us at Vundacast. You can check us out on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify. You can tell your friends to check out the Vundacast. That is always greatly appreciated. Shout outs are what makes the world go round. So feel free
Hey friends, say your family, tell people you don't even like. I'll do anything for attention, man.
I have been your host, Steven.
And I have been and still am and will always be world non-binary champion D-Rock.
And this is where the part where I'm supposed to say something funny.
Remember, kids.
Remember, kids. Well, before Remember, kids. The last two podcasts we did before this one, we talked a lot about wrestling.
Yes.
And Brody Lee died from AEW, and we had speculated in our speculation episode about all the different things some of the different things they could have done with Brody Lee. So it's very sad that all of those possibilities aren't going to happen. But in light of the possibility of dying at the age of 41,
right.
Remember, kids, hug everyone you love. Tell them you love them. Every day is not guaranteed.
Amen.
Woo!
Hail Thunder.
Hail Thunder.
Vundacast? Give it up for Vundacast, man. What an adorable name.
You're listening to the Vundacast.
What's up, everybody? This is Jason David Frank, Green Ranger. You're listening to Vundacast.
Subscribe to the Vundacast.